Hello, good evening. It is now 5:32. We're getting welcome to our board meeting for July 11th. Welcome to our regular board meeting for Vancouver Public Schools. Before we get started, I want to share a few thoughts and reminders. We want our boardroom to be a welcoming, safe space for all and any of our community members and guests. As this is a business meeting, we do expect those in attendance to conduct themselves in a respectful way. We would ask that you do not interrupt in the meeting, and if there is an immediate need that you have such an audio concern or question, please move to the back and let one of our staff members know. As a reminder, there is a designated space for any video recording and or media. We will now get started with our business meeting and the items on our agenda. We will now do roll call. Director Decker.
I'm here.
Director Sproul.
Here.
Director Barros.
Here.
And Dr. Smith is out today, but I am here. And so we do have quorum. First, we will start with our superintendent report. Dr. Snow.
Thank you, Director Zavella. Thank you for being here today too. Kind of a smaller audience in July, so got a whole side that's open tonight. We're glad that some of you were able to join us, and we're glad those that are able to join us online. I'm going to pull up some slides. Okay. And the first part of our superintendent report today is actually a budget update from Brett Blechschmidt. He'll talk a little about the journey we've been on towards the 23-24 budget and give you some information and be ready to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Dr. Snell. So yeah, we'll start off with just kind of a review of how we've got to this place and what we still have forward ahead of us in the budget adoption process. So you can see the process really started even leading into March. There was some analytics that were being done to prepare us for those March and April, May mileposts. We're now in July, where we're pulling all of the financial data together into one comprehensive budget, the bottom line. And per state requirements, we have a 4-year outlook that we build off of the current year's budget. So that work is largely done, but we're putting the final pieces and the final reconciling adjustments into that system so that we'll have it available well in advance of the August meeting, in which we would ask the board to consider adopting it formally via resolution. So that's kind of where we're at and where we're going. We always like to, in these budget updates and conversations around the district finances, to highlight that we do have a dedicated budget landing page on our website, and there's a whole host of resources for folks to review financial information, both VPS as compared to some of our similar sized districts. There's some details on how we've spent our ESSER funding over the last 3 years. And then there's also a 3-year budget comparison. So we can kind of look at budget data year over year to look at trends and patterns that are emerging. So that will be updated here in the next couple of weeks in anticipation of that August meeting, so that the 3-year budget look will incorporate the prospective budget in 23-24. So for the budget planning process in 23-24, one of our goals was to, as the visual indicates there, kind of create a stair step, because we've got some challenging dynamics that we, along with all the other districts in the country really, and specifically in Washington State, are dealing with. The first one is enrollment hasn't fully recovered from the COVID reductions that we all saw. We're trying to gradually over time kind of balance our staffing back to that lower norm, the new normal of enrollment, which is slightly lower than the pre-pandemic levels. And that also is where our state funding is going to be maintained. So there's some pressure to kind of gradually wean ourselves off of that staffing level that we were ramped up to prior to and through the COVID pandemic. We want to maintain flexible and adaptable programming for our students, knowing that what we did last year might not meet the needs next year, and certainly 4 or 5 years ago is not necessarily as applicable and appropriate for what our students require and deserve today. So again, I mentioned the stair step to kind of gradually reduce our reliance on one-time funding from the federal government, which is commonly called ESSER funding, and also kind of right-size the staff to our state funding and enrollment levels. And just a reminder that these are going to be some challenging times that we're headed into, and we've already kind of started to get a flavor for in this budget cycle. But they are cycles, and we do see that there's a constant evolution of our needs in terms of how we can meet the students' opportunities and needs that they bring to us. And enrollment is always going to be a cyclical thing, and unfortunately it drives a disproportionate amount of our funding, so we do have to be reactive to those enrollment fluctuations. The legislature has significant impact on what we do and how we do it in terms of the funding that they provide and some of the rules and requirements that they apply to our work. And then lastly, one of the other major cycles that we have to navigate through is relating to our employment contracts and making sure that we're fair and competitive with the market that's out there. And so we can provide a talented staff to meet the needs of our students. So as we kind of pulled everything together for the 23-24, we can kind of look back to what we were talking about this time last year and see, well, what has changed as we've evolved for 1 year from the last completed budget cycle, again, in 22-23 or for 22-23. And the big one is the last leg of the ESSER funding that I referred to, about 38.5 million. Is largely gone. There's a small amount of carryover that we'll be able to use to balance the 23-24 budget, but it's a very small piece compared to the 38.5 that we were able to bring to bear at this time last year. Enrollment projections, like I said, they haven't fully recovered. They're pretty much flattening out there now. You can see that we're slightly higher than what we budgeted for the year that just completed, but not quite as much. We're not budgeting as much for next year as we push kind of lower cohorts through the system. Positively, the legislature did step up and increase some of the drivers in our special education funding, which was a welcome and quite frankly overdue investment on their part. That's going to reduce our reliance on local levies to meet the needs of those students in that special education program by about 3 million, which again is very welcome. Unfortunately, we're still almost $10 million short in terms of the state and federal resources to meet the legal and moral obligations that we have to those students. And then lastly, not unique to Vancouver, but as we continue to aspire to attract and retain a quality workforce, our salaries and benefits are increasing by a little over $20 million. And unfortunately, not even half of that is provided in state funding increases. So that leads us to kind of the overall view of the 23-24 budget. And then again, as mentioned, the state requires us to then forecast, and those outgoing years are obviously very much crystal ball views. There's a lot of things that can change as we navigate the variables that we've already talked about. But per the state requirements, you can see that we are planning to and budgeting to consume a significant portion of our cash reserves or beginning fund balance that we've accumulated over the course of a number of years. And this is the exact type of circumstance that we have been accumulating that fund balance to weather the storm. The rainy days, unfortunately, are upon us from a financial perspective. So we're lucky to have that rainy day fund. So as we consume that the first year, unfortunately, we will have to wean ourselves off of that. That's a one-time resource, i.e. the stair-step concept. So as we get into 24-25 and 25-26, and then obviously the fourth year out, you can see that there's some belt tightening that's going to have to occur, and some tough prioritization conversations that we're going to have in order to bring the expenditures back in line with that revenue level, which we anticipate increasing, but only modestly going forward without a significant increase in enrollment. So more work to come, but that's kind of how we've built this budget to kind of stair step it down into really the more difficult conversations will be around this time next year.
Thank you, Brett. Are there questions or comments from board directors?
Just want to say thank you for the very detailed information.
Okay, I will continue with the last topic for the superintendent's report. And we've had an ongoing strategic planning update. And tonight I also wanted to give you some information and share with the public some of the things that have been happening since our last update. We actually had a school board work session on June 20th, where you looked at a lot of the data that had come in and looked at some emerging themes and started to help prioritize the work for us and provide direction to us as a staff. Just as a summary, we had over 6,500 engagements from our community. So we're very grateful for people that took the time to contribute their thoughts, whether that was through a survey or a listening session or an interview. All those things were really important. And as we looked at that data, four emerging themes really kind of started to crystallize. One is just the vision of what we want for each student in our system when they graduate, the experiences that we want them to have. And then it started to form into three kind of student-centered pillars or cornerstones related to their experiences, the community, and workforce or staff. And so this was presented to you on June 20th, and then we got some feedback on that. Over the summer, we've been working on that feedback and are gearing up for an August 8th board retreat to really center this work. And Bill Ullman and Janelle Ephraim will be re-engaging our steering committee this summer twice to look at this information as well and to provide some feedback to you as board directors. Just at a high level, the vision of a graduate at the last board meeting, our colleagues from Point North took a lot of time to walk through this information with you. So I'm not going to read through all the slides again, but these are the attributes or the skills, qualities that the community thought was important for our graduates to have. And so there's some themes or titles to those themes that are bold and in the light blue, and then a description of what those could look like. And again, taking 6,500 engagement inputs and then trying to condense those and consolidate those takes a lot of work. And so that's why we want to keep coming back to you and the community to make sure that we're on the right track. There's a vision statement as well that tries to take all those themes and descriptions and put them into a short paragraph that talks about who we want to be as a school district for our students, who we want to be as a community for our students. And then these cornerstones that the board spent some time with in the June 20th workshop. Also, the board last year, through the support of the community and an engagement process, adopted an equity policy. And so we started to look at cross-reference and references between what we heard from the community and those cornerstones and where that was showing up in the equity policy or procedures. And so just trying to find alignment between what we're already doing and things that maybe we need to do more of or less of. And similarly, taking those cornerstones and looking at those, the policy and procedures that already exist and starting to draft some goals. And this is where our hope is that the board can provide clarity at the August 8th retreat to orient our district to the work of year one of the strategic plan, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is a timeline of where it does not show the full year that led up to June 2023, but really what's going on from here on out. And so you can see that board work session that was highlighted in June, and then looking into July, some work with the planning and steering advisory committee, gearing up for the board retreat August 8th, and then going back to our advisory committees in August and September and just checking in again. Asking maybe some specific questions about what's emerging. In September, similar work, sharing updates at the board meetings with the community. And then finally, we're looking at the October board meeting on October 10th to present a strategic plan for the board's consideration and possible final adoption. And then alongside of that, communicating a plan that could probably have some depth to it in terms of pages and action steps and priorities. Also trying to raise up graphics and high level summaries so that people can engage it and go deeper if they want and have good understanding of what we heard from the community and what's going to be a priority for us moving forward. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions or comments. You all have been living this and trying to provide input and trying to make sense of all the input. So I'll turn it over to you.
I don't have any questions, but I'm really excited for the next steps because I think it's been kind of this vision or all of these different pieces and kind of seeing it come together with the cornerstones, but then the next step of taking that into actual like measurable goals. Because I think we can come up with this is our vision of what we want to do. And, but really like, okay, how are we going to do that? And how are we going to measure if we have done what we say we want to do? I think I'm excited for kind of those next steps and what that's going to look like.
I just wanted to acknowledge the workshop on the 20th. Obviously, Point North was critical in facilitating a really productive conversation because we had to digest a lot of data. And I think the vision of the graduate that you put up there, it felt like we had great consensus around what that vision was, and now using that kind of as inspiration towards building those goals and how we will measure our goals.
I know the board put a lot of time and thought into the language that's used and trying to make it accessible to people. Sometimes in education, we have a lot of acronyms and other things that doesn't make it very relatable. And so you see a slide in front of you with some changes in words and things like that. And that's a lot of your input. And trying to listen as you try to make sense of what the community shared. And so we're hoping that as we continue to go back and forth between these public sharing of what we've heard, that people will continue to let us know because we want this plan to be our community's, our district's plan. So I appreciate all the time and energy that you put in on this. And with that, that's all for the superintendent report tonight.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have our audience participation, citizen comments. So the citizen comments is the time in our meeting where the board and administrative staff welcome comments from the public. If you'd like to address the board and did not have an opportunity to sign in at the start of the meeting, please do so now. You may continue to sign in at the time during the citizen comments portion of our meeting. We ask that you approach the podium and state your name and affiliation with the district for the record. You will have 3 minutes to make your comments. When you hear a chime, please conclude your remarks. If you have materials or additional comments you would like the board to review, please hand them to staff in the back of the boardroom. This information will be provided to the superintendent and the board. Because most matters require fact-finding and review, and the state's Open Public Meetings Act restricts deliberation on topics that have not been placed on the publicly noticed agenda in advance, the board is not able to respond to any public comments made at this time. If follow-up action is necessary, the board will ask the superintendent to work with administrative staff to consider the information and respond accordingly. So as a regular business meeting of the board, we expect the audience to conduct themselves professionally and courteously. Speakers are also expected to be respectful. We ask the audience to refrain from clapping, sharing, or commenting while others give public comments. Whether you are in support or against, we recognize that there are diverse beliefs and feelings across our stakeholders in our district. But one thing we have in common is that we all want to do what is best for our children. We are here today to work towards their future. The board asks that personnel complaints be submitted in writing. Disruptive conduct may cause the meeting to be adjourned and all audience members to be removed. The board appreciates, listens, and cares about the broad range of perspectives in our community. Thank you for your comments. We do not have any Zoom comments, correct? So we will start with Ginny Griffiths.
Well, I like Joanne.
Okay, Joanne Parent.
Hi, this is Joanne. I'm Joanne Parent, and I had a grandson in Vancouver Public Schools and a granddaughter, but we are now homeschooling my grandson, and my granddaughter graduated last year from Hudson Bay. Before I start reading what I'm going to read, I just wanted to say, doesn't relate to school, but I saw the movie Sound of Freedom today, based on a true story about child sex trafficking. Everybody should go see that movie, really. It's very impactful. Anyway, this is about the study that was done on the FLASH program. And it says a recent press release by King County, Washington claims that a new national study shows the county's comprehensive sexual health curriculum, FLASH, is clinically proven to reduce teen pregnancy. The King County website states that FLASH is an effective, proven program at reducing unintended pregnancy and STDs among teens. However, the cited study conducted by employees of a company that promotes FLASH produced no such evidence, but rather found more evidence of FLASH failure than success. The FLASH study did not measure the program's impact on teen pregnancy or STD, so any claims that it proves FLASH reduces teen pregnancy and STDs are simply not true. The study did measure self-reported teenage sexual behavior, sexual activity, condom, contraceptive use, and abstinence, and found no statistically significant effects on the population of FLASH participants. Behavior impacts were not evident for the entire study. This is clear evidence that FLASH failed to demonstrate the intended behavior effects. There was one subgroup effect, an increase in condom use for the subgroup of FLASH students who had not previously had sex and then became sexually active after participating in the FLASH program. But the increase in condom use was short-term. That is not statistically significant beyond the 3-month follow-up. The researchers themselves stated that this short-term effect must be viewed with caution given the small sample size in this subgroup. Instead, King County presented this dubious finding as evidence, the only behavior evidence that FLASH is successful. In reality, it is evidence of failure of this minor effect to endure beyond 3 months. Furthermore, one may well ask why this subgroup of sexually abstinent students became sexually active after participating in FLASH. The study also found that FLASH did not show impact on 2 important student attitudes targeted by the program. There were no statistically significant effects on intentions to use condoms, a key determinant of condom use, or comfort communicating with mother/father about sexual health. Both of these were major program goals and represent notable FLASH failures. There's copies of the study for each one of you at the table. So you guys please read it, review it.
Thank you, Joanne. Next, we have Ginny Griffiths.
Hi, my name is Jenny Griffiths. I'm a citizen in Vancouver, Washington. First, I would like to read a verse from the Bible. It's Matthew 18:6, which says, "But whosoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea." Second, I'm going to quote from that institute that Joanne started with. It says the lack of success found in the FLASH study parallels the findings of a recently published global review of comprehensive sex education effectiveness. This study found that most school-based CSE programs such as FLASH have not been effective at producing sustained improvement on key behavioral outcomes for the targeted student populations. The FLASH study touted by King County produced more evidence of program failure than success. So why does the county claim that it proves FLASH's effectiveness contrary to the study's actual finding? And my third point is, why are we promoting all of these social issues when our students are failing in reading, writing, and arithmetic, and the history of our country? And the history of our country right now is told through the 1619 project, which is not the truth. So we're looking for truth. Lastly, I would like to quote from the Declaration of Independence. "All men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights. 3 of these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The government was formed to protect these rights. Our rights come from God. The government is limited to securing those rights. Personally, I'd like to say how thoroughly disappointed I am in the public school system. As a private citizen, I know the difference between right and wrong and good and evil. And then the Bible verse says, woe to those who call good evil and evil good. I will be praying that you'll make all decisions based on what's good for our children and for what your heart tells you is the right thing to do. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. God bless you and God bless America.
Thank you, Jeannie. Next we have Heather.
My name is Heather Vian. I am a citizen in Vancouver, Washington, and I am a parent of 2 kids in the public school system here at Vancouver. So I have an article here from Pioneer Institute on Public Policy Research, based out of Massachusetts and Boston. Can't say that word. Anyway, the article is new study finds multiple problems with push for social emotional learning in K-12 education. And this article was written in on March 11th of 2019. There's little research for or objective and reliable way to measure social emotional efficiency. It raises significant concerns about student health and about student privacy. Social emotional learning has a lot of promises, like it's going to help with greater academic achievement and personal fulfillment, but unfortunately it falls flat. Social emotional learning actually has very little research to back those things up. And as well, it also poses, like I said already, poses the threat to student privacy and their health is very significant. So social emotional causes students to focus less on academics and knowledge. And instead, it focuses on their attributes, mindsets, values, and behaviors. Many of the terms are ill-defined, and which also raises significant questions about what is to be promoted. There was a really good book called Social Emotional Learning K-12 Education as New Age Nanny State, written by a lawyer, Jane Robbins, and also Dr. Karen Ephraim, who is a pediatrician. And they state in their book, but having a government vendor or unqualified public school official implement social emotional curriculum based on coffee table psychology is quite another subject. They also state that given the uncertainty around diagnosis and treatment of mental and emotional problems, even by highly trained physicians, the social emotional movement runs the risk of further increasing the trend toward dangerous overdiagnostic and over-medication of American school children. I also want to mention in here too that nationally in 2018, federal, state, and local governments invested $30 billion to implement social emotional learning in the K-12 curriculum in public schools. This is surprising because as we know, it's a tight budget.
Thank you, Heather. Mike Delaneo.
Hello, I'm Mike Gelenio. I'm a resident and parent within the district. I have concerns about what's being taught to students in this district. As I looked at the standardized testing from OSPI for the school district, the scores are pretty darn bad. 42.3% of students meeting standards in English language arts, 29.4 in math, 29.7 in science, It's pathetic. These numbers were from spring 2022. These scores need to be brought up and should really be the primary focus of the education of students in this district. But instead, it seems that you're focused on breaking the family mold and taking parents out of the picture. When it comes to their education, you seem to take the stance that teachers are the child's parents. But in reality, parents are the primary stakeholders in their child's life, including their education. You are literally allowing indoctrination of these students through the means of diversity, equity, and inclusion, social emotional learning, and comprehensive sex education, which leads to mental, physical, psychological, and sexual abuse of students because adults don't care what they're teaching students. Why can't a kid be a kid? Why can't boys be boys, girls be girls? Why are we confusing them with this whole gender ideology? Telling them that they are in the wrong body and that they need to get surgery to fix that problem. But it's unfortunate that sex reassignment surgery is heavily promoted to school age children prior to completion of puberty and are before they're fully developed into adults. But no one addresses the long-term adverse effects that can occur from surgery from when they become adults and they reach their middle-aged years. This all leads to trauma, abuse throughout their lives, and this abuse may lead to them abusing others in the future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment time. We appreciate everyone's times and comments. Thank you all who shared your public comments. As I mentioned at the start of our meeting, the board cannot respond directly to any public comments or questions because Washington State's Open Public Meetings Law requires the district to provide advance notice of topics that will be discussed. Although we cannot respond to your individual comments, it is important that we state that the board's unequivocal support for each and every one of our students. All of our students have values and deserve to be respected for who they are. We welcome, value, and promote diversity among students, employees, and our community. Again, thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with the board. We are now going to move into our action items. The first on the list is approval of minutes for our June 6th and 20th meetings. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Do I have a second? Any comments or questions? We will move to a vote. All those in favor in approving the minutes, Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Barros,
Approve.
and I also approve, so the motion passes. Before we go into our consent agenda, I was hoping Dr. Snell could share with us around the recommendation to approve item 21 under consent agenda G, the parent square, a new way to centralize communication between our district and our families.
Yes, happy to, because this was an item that was not on the committee of the whole cycle, and the review process for the board is to look at items that could potentially be on the regular meeting and have discussion in the committee of the whole. Parent Square is an application that's used to communicate between families and schools. And part of our migration to a new student information system, we are at a position where we either need to upgrade our current model or look at tools that might better serve the community and that goal of communication. And Parent Square, you all had a presentation individually about that, and were able to answer and ask some questions and hopefully get some answers around that. But some of the features are the ability to translate using artificial intelligence. And, you know, at any given day, we have, 97, 99 different languages in our district. And so that's something that's really important. And I know that the board has put a lot of value on is how do we engage with those families? And then the ability to increase just like two-way and be able to see when people are actually getting information, how they're accessing information, what they want to tell us about that information, and then how we can adjust the communication communication structures to better meet those needs. So that's a high level. Welcome any comments or questions about it, but it is on the consent agenda today. And I know Director Zavala wanted to make sure that it was just noted because a lot of times contracts don't necessarily show up directly to parents in terms of the engagement, but this will be a new app for them. And it's an app that many school districts use and comes highly regarded. So.
Do you mind sharing kind of why we had to do this kind of a fast turnaround?
Well, I think that with the transition to the student information system is kind of the key here is that as we're going through that process, we're discovering places that either we need to kind of Band-Aid together to kind of keep it going with the transition or leverage the opportunity to do something maybe better. And in this one, at least in our analysis, we think this will be cost neutral or actually savings with a better service model from the reviews and doing kind of outreach to districts that are currently using that. And timing wise, starting the school year with a new application model is much more, you don't want to start mid-year with that. So thinking that we want to move ahead, get our team ready to deploy that and get communication ready to share. So
Thank you.
thank you.
So we have items and on our agenda, slate of items for approval under our instructional and administrative support. And we also have items under our fiscal support services. Do I have a motion?
I move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion, comments, or questions? No, okay. So these are items that we've discussed in our last committee of the whole. So seeing that there's no discussion, we're going to put it to a vote. Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Barros,
Approve.
and I also vote to approve, so the motion passes. We now move into the part of it for our Board of Directors report. Do we have anything to report?
I don't necessarily have anything to report, but because our last general meeting was prior to graduation, I just want to say how fun it was and impactful to see the outcomes of all the work that we're doing and to see the joy and the excitement in not only the completion of their schooling, but in what their future holds. And some of the graduation ceremonies were a lot more noticeably joyful than others, but they all had a sense of joy, and they were all unique to the schools, which was also why I'm glad that although it was an exhausting week, I am glad that we made the decision as a board to all attend all of them that we could, because it really gave you a feel for the families and the communities.
I also have to agree. I think, we are in a lot of meetings. And so I think to me, at least, it's a very big accumulation of why we do the work that we do. And that week was the most exhausting week I think I've had all year, but it was one of the most rewarding weeks to be present for our students and to see them just their final hurrah. So, yeah, but I'm looking forward to the new school year too. Any other? Nope, I think we're all looking forward to August. So that would be the end of our meeting. Right, thank you so much for attending. It is now 6:12. Our meeting is over. Thank you.